I don't want to target any nowadays. But a lot of young females I've seen, especially in my school, have fallen into relationships that aren't good, or because it's someone there to listen and they feel alone. So whenever they have someone there to listen, they mistake it for care and affection when that's not the case.
Today we're meeting Noah, incredible young man that through his struggles, challenges, and even finding love, shaped who he is today and who he is with God. So I think you will really enjoy this interview, and welcome to Tea Talks. Noah, thank you so much for accepting the invitation to come here. I met you not too long ago. We had a little get together where we were talking to young adults at your church. And I saw your comments. I was like, I would love to interview this young adult, this young man. And so I'm glad that you said yes.
Of course. Yeah, glad I accepted the invitation too.
That's awesome. So why don't we start with who you are?
So obviously my name is Noah Edward. I'm from Florida, originally from Florida. I moved here about 9 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, and so far I'm liking it. Yeah.
You like it here?
Yeah, I like it here.
Well, it's been 9 years. You better like it or not.
Yeah.
You would be miserable for 9 years
yeah, 9
here.
years, yeah.
Yeah. So how was growing up? Were you always like part of a church? What is like the family and your spiritual background?
So I was born in the church. I was born in the church ever since I was a kid. So I grew up a Christian. And yeah, my dad was the one that wasn't growing up Christian. So growing up, it's kind of like shaped me. Even though it shaped him as his person, it shaped me also because
Is he still not a Christian, or was that before you were born?
That was before I was born.
Okay.
But he became a Christian before I was born, and a few years later I was born. So he always tells me about his testimony of how he became a Christian. So it inspires me. It inspired me to, continue being a Christian.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that was basically the big influence for you?
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a big influence, yeah.
There was ever a time like, okay, you grew up pretty much, by the time you were born, both of your parents were already Christians. Was there a time that you can think of it that it was no longer your parents' religion, like something that they pushed onto you, but it became yours?
Probably when I started to get older and I started to kind of leave I would say, threshold safety of my parents. As you get older, you get more freedom and you see how stuff are. And it kind of like resonated to me that without prayer and without having God, you're kind of like just, it's just, you don't have that protective layer. What else is going to protect you? So that's kind of when it kind of hit me that, oh, wow, I need to make a decision. I can't keep on floating in between forever, because it's either, I would always say, it's either you're with the other side or you're with him. There's no in between. You can't float around. So I was like, yeah, before I continue and go on in life on my own without my parents, I want to make a decision and be steadfast in my decision.
When you talk about like floating, you were a young man, teen years, and what was the floating around? Like, were you starting to have doubts about God or church and things like that?
I was starting to have doubts about God, but it was kind of like I started to it's kind of hard juggling. As a young person, it's kind of hard juggling two lives. I was kind of like...
What was the two lives like? Tell me.
So at home, I was the quiet,
good
Christian boy. I didn't really do too much. And when I went to church, I was, respectful and nice. And when I was at school, I was still the same. Or when I was out, I was still the same person, respectful, nice. But, having influence with other kids and stuff like that, you start to wild out a little bit. So it was kind of like, it was hard juggling too. It's kind of, it's kind of hard. I wanted to just be like, you know what, I'm gonna just be one person. Just don't matter if I'm at home, if I'm out, just continue being one person, person who, and it was also kind of hard whenever I would act out, or I would, do stuff that's not usual. Even kids would even know I was a Christian, but they knew I acted different. But a lot of kids, when I tell them I'm a Christian, they're not surprised because of the way I act. They're like, oh yeah, you seem like a kid that would be a Christian. Because a lot of young people nowadays, they say they're Christian, but you would never have guessed it by the way they act. But I kind of acted quiet and nice and stuff like that. So whenever I tell people that, they're not really surprised. And whenever I used to, say words that weren't the cleanest, kids even my age were like, oh, that's not you. Or they'll be like, oh, don't say that.
So they would call you out.
They would call me out.
That's not really you.
Yeah, they would be like, it sounds weird coming from your mouth. And it kind of like wake me up and be like, oh, wow. If they think it's weird, then I shouldn't be saying that.
Yeah, so maybe there's something that you did before that showed them, hey,
yeah,
I am. And even they notice it. That's not.
Yeah, that's not you.
You.
Yeah.
Did you ever had like a moment? And you don't have to have. Some people are like frustrated because they didn't have that moment. But like, did you have that moment where it kind of clicked for you between you and God, and kind of like what a lot of people that when they come from outside of the church, they call it like the conversion moment. Was there a specific event moment for you?
I would have to say, probably last summer was kind of when the moment hit. I was kind of, I would say it was last summer, I was looking for a job, and I was looking for, I was looking for a girlfriend. I was looking for love. So
sure.
yeah, I made a prayer to God. I told him, I was like, I remember before, this was my second time. My first time was when I asked God. I was like, I wanted to make the basketball team. When I first moved to North Carolina, I was a soccer player back in Florida. When I moved to North Carolina, I became a basketball player. I switched. So I wanted to be the basketball team. And so I made a prayer. I was like, God, if I make the basketball team, I'll get baptized. I ended up not making the team because their games were on Saturdays. And the coach said, if I make the team, I'm gonna have to go on Saturdays. And I said I couldn't. So
that's when you go to church.
Yeah, I want to go to church. So I just ended up not making it. And so I got mad and I didn't do it. But so last summer, I kind of made that same prayer again. And I was like, I'm about to graduate high school. I want to get a job so I can start saving some money up for college. And I also want to have like a girlfriend, because once I leave high school, it's going to be harder to meet new people and, find someone who really is my person. So I told God, I was like, I want someone who's not ashamed to go to church with me, or I can, talk to about God and stuff like that, or I can introduce to my ways and it wouldn't be a problem. And so I remember I went through almost through the whole school year, half the school year, and then out of nowhere, I met this, my girlfriend currently, I met this girl, and it was kind of...
I met her, didn't I?
Yeah, you did meet her, yeah. It was kind of like weird because we don't have any classes together. I used to see her on the school, but it's like on my 4 years of school, I've only seen her like 3 times, twice. So it's like our paths don't really intertwine. So it's kind of like out of nowhere that this happened. So I texted her off of Instagram. I texted her off of Instagram just randomly. I was in the bathroom and I texted her. I was like, you know what, might as well. Texted her, and then I didn't expect her to respond, but she responded, and so we ended up talking. And long story short, it became something new. And I remember that prayer, and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna see how this goes, because there was some few false alarms in the early of the year. But I remember the first time my mom was like, okay, if you want, to get this serious, ask her to come to church with you. And so I was scared. Oh, I was so scared.
Yeah, because that could make it or break it.
Yeah, it can make it or break it. So I was like, my friends, everyone was like saying, even my friends don't go to church. They were like, oh, is she gonna go to church too? And I was like, I don't know, man. I'm gonna ask her. And they were like, she might say no. She seems like the church type. And so I was like, I'm gonna just ask it. And I asked it one night, and I was like, would you have any problem coming to church with me? Da-da-da. So on Saturday, we don't really go on Sunday, we go on Saturday. And she was like, yeah, sure. And so I ended up going to church. My parents, everything, my parents liked her. And it was kind of weird because she wasn't really surprised, like, to all the stuff that was going on, She wasn't really asking questions of why do you go to church on Saturday and stuff like that. And later on, I said like a few months afterwards, I was at her house, and out of nowhere, she just randomly says that her grandma is Seventh-day Adventist.
Wow.
And her dad was also Seventh-day Adventist when he was growing up. He left the church. And I was like, I didn't know this. And then she was like,
So she
yeah.
was a lot more familiar than
She
you
was
could
more
ever
than I thought.
imagine.
And I was like, oh, wow. And that's when I kind of hit me. I went home that day and I was like so excited. I saw my parents. I was like, wow, that's actually a crazy answer to prayer, because I just thought my prayers were being answered, but it was way deeper than that. It was someone I never would have thought she was an Adventist too, because I thought I was the only one in my school. But, and it's, I was with her for like, we were together for like, I think 4 months. And it just came out like that she's used to being Seventh-day Adventist. She used to go to a Seventh-day Adventist church. And so this is nothing new to her. So it was kind of like, oh, wow, someone who was Seventh-day Adventist, you know, it's just, there's no way this would have
It's
happened.
basically you bring her back.
Without God. So.
It's interesting because when you first started sharing this, you were like, I pray for a girlfriend, and you were kind of like shy to say it. Let me tell you, one thing that I have learned is that God meets us exactly where we are. You don't have to be shy because it seems like silly that you wanted to have a girlfriend, but no, I had experiences when my one of the first experiences that I had with God. I wasn't raised a Christian. I was atheist. So I was very far from any of this. And I remember the very beginning, God used a movie. And the movie was a sci-fi movie. It was not religious at all. To put in my brain that there was maybe a possibility to a God. So God used different things, you know. So don't be ashamed or shy because, oh, this seems to be silly. No. That's how God worked with you. You were romantic. You wanted to find a girlfriend. So that's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch a little. Mm-hmm. Now you are closer to God. You're older. You are like, okay, it's no longer my parents' religion. Now it's my religion. And now you have the girlfriend. God came through for you. Yeah. What are the challenges that you face in the church, in church ministry as a young adult?
I would say one of the biggest challenges is, for me, and I think for a lot of young people, is the comfortability of coming forward to talk about the problems. And I feel like nowadays, people don't really understand that young people who are Christians nowadays struggle with a lot more temptations, for say, than how it was before.
I think it's more exposed.
More exposed, for sure, because now it's a lot of stuff, you know, just modernized and just, you know, really, I don't want to say popular, but it's kind of, they make it where it's normalized.
A lot more is normalized today than was just 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. It's just really normalized, and people you don't really blink whenever you see it. Like a few years ago, you know, you would be surprised at some stuff, but then nowadays it's just like, oh, that's normal. And I feel like that really numbs our brains, especially on people's brains, to think that, you know, stuff like this is just regular. And I feel like to go back on to your question, the temptations are way easier to fall into, and I feel like whenever as a young person you fall into that, you feel so ashamed because you're like, oh wow, I'm a Christian, I shouldn't be doing stuff like this, or I shouldn't be watching stuff like this. It's really hard because, and it's harder to come back. It's harder to go to the older people in the church and tell them, or be open with them and say, oh, I've done this. How do I, you know, help me to, you know, ask for forgiveness or get closer to God, or how do I resist this temptation? Because it feels like you'll be judged, or you'll just be like, oh, wow. And I've had this problem with me and my dad before. He would say like, oh, just pray or stuff like that. But I feel like, or he'll get mad at me and be like, oh, why don't you pray a lot? Or why don't you read your Bible so much? But he doesn't understand like all the distractions. There's so much distractions nowadays. But before, when he was growing up, all there was to do was play outside and every now and then call on the phone. But nowadays it's just so much distractions and so much temptations that I understand where only another young person can really understand where you're truly coming from, of temptations that there is. So I feel like that's really a big issue. And I feel like
so basically the older generation given the time to understand. So it's not so much the temptations, but it's more like not having anybody to talk.
Yeah.
And to bring it up and not feel judged.
And they get offer advice of how to resist and how to like
besides
avoid.
Just go read your Bible.
Yeah, go read your Bible, go pray about it, or Yeah, because it's not that
And
easy.
sometimes, and tell me if I'm wrong, because I read a lot of research, but I like to hear from the young people to know if sometimes it's not only trying to find solutions, but it's just listening.
Yes, yeah.
Just having somebody that will listen, that you know that this person is not judging me because I am going through this.
Mhm. Yeah. I feel like that does a lot to have someone to, listen and hear your problems because I feel like a lot of young people, especially people who aren't Christians, struggle with having someone there. I know a
Mhm.
lot of young people my age or in high school who have, zero support. It feels like they're alone. They're doing it on their own. And whenever there's someone there to listen to them, they, a lot of, I don't want to target any nowadays, but a lot of young females I've seen, especially in my school, have fallen into relationships that aren't good, or because it's someone there to listen and they feel alone. So whenever they have someone there to listen, they mistake it for care and affection when that's not the case. So I feel like that does a lot, and I feel like if people, the older people or church, can listen to young people without them feeling like they're judged, because if someone feels like they're judged, they won't come up and share that with you again, because who wants to be judged? So I feel like if they can hear and listen to them without being judged, it would really do a lot, because it would make them seem that, oh, I'm not alone, and other people struggle with temptations also. It's not only me.
Yeah,
So
you touched a very sensitive and dear to my heart topic, which is how young ladies will fall to traps
mhm.
because of sometimes it's just the need to be loved.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, we have a lot of broken families. We have a lot of young people that didn't receive that love at home and ended up falling to the wrong arms, let's put
yeah,
it this
yeah.
way. And you brought a very important topic, not topics, but like points. The way that you're mentioning was mentors.
Mhm.
How important do you think mentors are?
I think mentors are really important because um everyone needs someone to guide them.
Mhm.
And I feel like having a mentor, for me, I feel like, in my definition of mentor, is someone other than your parents, because your parents are here, they're placed here to guide you.
And there's always a bias,
Yeah,
right?
they're always a bias because
Yes,
you're
yes.
their child. But I feel like having a mentor, you have someone who's not your parents, someone who doesn't really has too much bias towards you and can give you unfiltered advice, and just, they've been here, they have more experience. So it's just like someone to help you lead through life other than your parents. So I feel like those are really important because everyone needs someone who's been there before, has had other experiences, to give them advice on how to navigate and how to avoid mistakes.
One of the things that you mentioned too is that you mentioned to me prior to this
Mm.
conversation that you wanted to talk about mental health. What did you want to share about that?
I wanted to share about things that I see that, or even I mean myself personally, I've struggled with, um, that other people struggle with also my age. And it's really about, it touches on the topic of, it's a really wide topic, so I can't really touch on
I know,
everything.
I know.
Yeah, really wide
You can
topic.
just pick one.
Pick one. I would say I would have to say media, that can also the amount, how do I put this? Um I feel like a lot of stuff people watch nowadays can really affect your mental health, and can really, because me personally, what I've struggled with is stuff that I've watched in the past that I shouldn't have been watching, or stuff that I've done in the past that I shouldn't have been doing. It really affects the mental health, because then you're like, oh wow, like you feel so ashamed, like you don't
Mhm.
even want to, you know, go to church or pray, because you're like, I can't forgive something like
It
that I've
affects your
done.
emotional
Yeah, it does.
mental health.
It
Yeah.
does, your emotional mental health, and a lot of like um stuff nowadays that people watch, and it just, for example, I would say TikTok, and it's a big thing nowadays. Everyone watches TikTok. I would say a lot of stuff that's on TikTok is not good, and it's hard because the adults are like, oh, then delete the app or don't watch it. But it's like everything nowadays is on TikTok. Yeah, there's some good stuff.
You kind of have to train your algorithm to what you want to watch. I made a big mistake, and this was before I understood how it worked. There was one day I watched something about a crime. Mm-hmm. Like somebody killed somebody, and I think it was like a 5 minutes video. Now everything the algorithm sends me is about crimes. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm getting depressed. I don't want to watch this anymore. Yes. So what I had to do purposely is search for a bunch of like something funny, inspirational, or something good. Now it shows me better stuff, you know? Yeah. But I understand exactly what you're saying. Not only that, but also the comparison game.
Yeah, the comparison game. People like compare themselves to other people. And another thing I've struggled with too is I have my mom always told me, or someone always told me, don't compare what you have to what someone else has, because you don't know what they did to get it and what they're doing to keep it.
And you don't even know if it's real.
Yeah, exactly. And I've seen like a lot of stuff on TikTok are fake, but a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
So for me, example, I've seen a lot of people on TikTok, they'll be my age, they'll be like, I'm an 18-year-old and I just bought my dream car. People would see that as a happy moment, but it affects like me, because I'm just like, oh wow, he's 18, he has a dream car, he has this, he has that. I'm 18, I'm still living at my parents' house and working at Publix. But it's just that it really
sometimes it's not real.
Yeah, it's not real. And it really affects someone's mental health, because it makes them think that, oh wow, it makes them compare themselves, make them feel less than themselves, because they're like, oh, wow, like this person's the same age as me, he has all this, and what am I doing wrong? It really gets you into something that should be happy, makes it depressing.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's realistic to tell young people never look at any social media, because forget it, they're gonna do it.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that we can do as leaders is help them see and learn how to separate what is reality, what is fiction. Mm-hmm. Because I get depressed when I start watching all of these ladies that go all over the world traveling, meeting the world. And I'm like, I want that. I want that life too. What would you say to a young person that is struggling right now with mental health, especially because of social media? What are the advices you give this person?
I would say the advice I give this person is to always, even though, yes, as some people, you like watching social media, sometimes you have to disconnect, and you also have to take some times where you just, calm down and live life without social media. But another advice,
have a real life too.
Exactly. I would say, again, don't compare yourself to people. Always remember that whatever someone's has, you don't know how they got it or what they're doing to keep it. They don't know if it's real, like you said. And I think that also I would say, if you physically cannot not watch social media, I would say watch stuff that uplift.
Yes. And
that make you happy, not stuff that makes you compare to other people or makes you want to stuff that's depressing. Watch stuff that uplifts you and makes you happy. But the important thing is have a life outside of social media, because it's not good to be always on social media. Have other people you can talk to, just enjoy life outside, just get outside sometimes, or just live in the moment. Set your phone down, turn it off, and just enjoy the moment.
Yep. How about, what would you say to churches and church leaders on the topic that we were talking before, how important it is to have mentors and people that will help these young people that are looking for answers, that are looking for community and a mentor? What would you say to churches, what they can do to help?
I would say to churches that to always keep in mind that we might be young now, but as young people, eventually we're gonna take over your spots. It sounds really
don't threaten them. That's what they're afraid.
It sounds really like malice, but really I'm trying to say is that eventually where you're at now, we're gonna be taking those spots. We're gonna be
And
taking
in
those
reality, they
roles.
want you guys to take
Yes,
it. They
and
want it, but you need to have the opportunity.
the opportunity exactly
Hmm.
to take it and take over. And I would say, it's important to mentor young people because they need it. They need the guidance. We might try and act like we know everything all the time because no one wants to be told what to do. But as young people, we need guidance and we need advice. And I feel like the temptations nowadays, like I said, are really, they're just thrown at you. You don't have to go looking for it. They're just there. You open your phone, they're there. So I feel like trying to understand them from their point of view, try and put yourself in their shoes, and that would really help. They would feel like more understood and more, listened to, and try not to judge. Even I judge sometimes. It's hard to not judge people.
We're all humans,
We're all human,
and we're going to
but
have to be patient with each other.
exactly, yeah, trying to pace with each other, but put yourself in their shoes because it would really, you could. It's yes, yeah. Nowadays we have it easier than some had it in the past, but in some other spots, especially mental and temptation wise, it's really harder, really harder.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say.
Noah, this was great.
Hmm.
I really appreciate
Of
spending the
course.
time and learning from you and
Yeah.
getting to know you. So thank you so much for coming.
No problem.